ABAP coding standards, we'll be discussing about the most important concepts like the introduction, general basic rules, ABAP specific basic rules, and structure and style, the architecture, secure and robust ABAP, obsolete language constructs, automatic check of naming conventions, and table of rules and recommended reading, the authors. So these are the things that we are going to see now. And in this, what are the programming guidelines? Why programming guidelines? Which guidelines are involved here? Target audience. So this is what we'll quickly discuss. And we'll have the general basic rules like separation of concerns and the KISS principle and correctness and quality, the ABAP object-oriented programming, how do we do the basic coding concept, structure and style of the entire program, how it should be, and the architecture of the OOPS programming, secure and robust ABAP, assignments, calculations, and other access of the data, system fields, internal tables, modulation units, dynamic programming, internalization. So these are the things that we are going to discuss on. So this book, you can go through this book and we can detailedly learn. So I'm going to get completely explain you the overview of this. So ABAP is a hybrid programming language. Why is it called a hybrid programming languages? Because it has got procedural language, which we did initially, and then object-oriented programming language. So these two are combined in the same editor. So it's not that you need to do object-oriented programming completely different and normal structured programming in procedural or structured programming in another editor. No, it's not like that. Everything can be done in a single editor. That's the reason it's called the hybrid programming language. So in this, like, we have the data encapsulation. So whatever function modules we are going to use, or the ABAP object-oriented programming encapsulation that we are going to use, this all comes under encapsulation, explicit instantiation, inheritance, and interfaces, events, explicit or orthogonal concepts, cleansed syntax, access to the new technologies. So these are the things that we have here. This is just an overview. So these are the exceptions which we have. Still, ABAP objects to replace classical processing blocks with methods. So this is what something we'll discuss. So as I told you, the function, the one event which we don't call and by default it will get triggered is the load of program. So this is how we have to follow it. Definition public, inheriting from, So here we have basically I'll go with the simple examples and I'll cover from the program type and attributes. This is just an overview of the different types of programs that we have. Let's start from I'll give you a quick overview of this uh, book so that we can go through that. And most important things is what I'll focus on. So here we have this data encapsulation. So in this, like we basically, as you already know, so public protected and package visible. So in this, like private, public, private, and protected will be there. No? So in this, even without an in-depth object-oriented modeling, application program benefit from these attributes with regard to stability of maintainability. So what happens here is like whenever we have the encapsulation, we just need to make sure that in the state of encapsulation, like the distribution of data across the different visibility sections have to be maintained properly. So here we need to have an order. Okay, the first and foremost point here we have to do is we have to maintain the order in the object-oriented program. Back with the latest ones actually. So of uh, order of this inheritance. Here the first one is order. We have to have a public section. We need to go for public section, then protected section, then private section. So these are the three sections that we have. In this order we have to follow. So we need to write first public, then protected, then private. This is how we have to write it. Okay, so then we have explicit instantiation. So explicit instantiation is like when we say create object, this is instantiation. Create object is an instantiation. So now when we are going to go ahead with the creating when we are creating the instantiation, creating instantiation means when we are creating an object which with reference to class, it's called instantiation. So we have something called automatic garbage collection, ensures objects that are no longer required for deleted from memory. So let us quickly go back to what are the coding standards that we have to follow. That will be better so that like we'll have a better understanding over it. Okay. Before that, we have the program types, right? So executable programs, class pool, and class pool is always contains declarative statements. It does not have anything that can be an executable program or something. Just declarative statements like local types and classes will be can be maintained in the class pool. So interface pool, it will always contain the interfaces, list of interfaces, function group, module pool, subroutine pool, and type groups. These are the different types of programs. We will quickly go for this. So this is something like whenever we are creating whenever we are creating a program, so we need to make sure that the Unicode checks is active. So this is something. What is Unicode is if you don't select it, it's a non-Unicode program. So to tell you in short about the Unicode and non-Unicode concept, basically everything that we write in a program will be converted into a binary language. Okay, so here we have this Unicode checks active. So this needs to be checked. So what is Unicode and what is non-Unicode? I'll tell you in short. See, everything that we do in the program, whatever we write, even if an alphabet is written, so let's say I've written A. So A has to be converted into binary language into ones and zeros, then it has to be stored. So if at all, if it is a normal programming, it will be converted into a 1 bit. Otherwise, it will go to 2 bits. So now what happens is like each 2 bytes. 1 byte is equals to 8 bits, right? So we'll have 2 bytes. So for Unicode, it will be 2 bytes. So 2 bytes in the sense like it will be 16 and 16 ones and zeros combination will be stored. With this, what happens is Unicode is universal code. So it can be it can be accessed. I mean, universal code, the Unicode maintained program, whatever is the binary language for A, for all other languages also, for A it will be the same one. So they maintain a universal code. So that universal code is nothing but Unicode. So if you go for Unicode check, it will be the program will take more space to save in the backend, but it will be more compatible with lot of other versions and languages. So this is what is the concept. So you have to always make it as Unicode, because in the non-Unicode programs you can readily execute a write access to be a subfield across two numeric components of a structure, whereas an implicit casting of the subarea takes place for the type C. This is something. So this is a byte order. It's called byte order. So the good example is you have to select it as Unicode. Now you can read this book and understand in more in detail why you have to do that. But this is one of the coding standards that we maintain. And original language. So here we'll already have the original language here. Original language is DE, and the language that we are using will be EN. So here this is describing a string. So there were things like, we had search and replaced. Search and replaced were used at the time. So there are some coding. So let me show you this. The first thing that we were using. So when we go to HC38, so here in this module, so we have something called Unicode. So this is Unicode. So by default, it is selected as Unicode. This is the latest editor that we have. So when we say save, it is executable. So here we in the previous versions we used to have this something like, see here, if at all if we have something like write size see. So here if you want to change this, we just need to click on this display, search, and here this is what we have. So here in the latest editor we have the facility called size rc. Now wherever we have size rc, we can change, we can replace that with some other field, like I'll change it with sy IEPID. I'll change everywhere, or like let's say I'll change this as sy datum. Okay, now everywhere that sy datum will be changed. So here we can select the cursor here and just say change. So here we go for this to replace. We go for replace. The data sy datum in this line has changed. sy datum, sy datum. So it's been changed now. So in this way we can do it. We can save it and we can back. And another one is like we have pretty printer. Okay, pretty printer is also used in maintaining the coding standards. For example, let's say the coding standard in our project is something like all the standard code needs to be written in caps lock. It should be in capital letters, and everything that user defines letters. Let's say if we have a 10,000 lines of code, you cannot go to every line and change this into capital letters. So with just one click you can change that. So what we can do is you can go for this uh, we can go for this pretty printer. For a pretty printer you have utility settings. In the utility settings we have something called the pretty printer. In this we can go to the pretty printer and select this upper class. So what should be in uppercase? Keywords. Only the keyword should be in uppercase, and rest of all the things can be in lowercase. If you say uppercase, everything, the entire code becomes uppercase. If you select this entire code will become lowercase, but we won't go for uppercase keywords. We'll just go for that and select OK. Just say OK. And now when we click on this pretty printer, all the standard codes will become capital letters, and everything that is written by user will be in lowercase. Similar thing can be done exactly opposite also, just by go to the utilities. Let's go to the utility settings and the pretty printer, and in this we'll change it to, we'll change this to lowercase keyword. So it will be exactly the opposite. Only lowercase, our standard code will become lowercase, and the remaining things will become uppercase. This is how it is. So it has become exactly opposite of it now. So that is the use of pretty printer, which is very much useful for maintaining the coding standards. This is what. So instead of using this replace substring with new into text and all these things, instead of writing this use of obsolete language elements, so this all these things will not work now. It will directly, you can do it in the GUI. That's what I wanted to tell you. This is what I wanted to show. Okay, and so instead of writing replace this thing, we'll say replace all occurrences. So replace substring with the new into text. We go for replace all occurrences of substring in text with new. So this is how we'll write it. Okay, and if you go for find, the search option is also become obsolete. So there are a couple of things which have become obsolete. Instead of search, we'll go for find here. So and then we have the syntax check. So in the coding standards, in this code, we also have to do something like extended program check. See, this is absolutely right. This program is syntactically correct, but it is not. It need not be the perfect. See, I mean, like this, we have the internal table which we have not used at all. Actually, here we are. This is a variable. Let's say I'll go for something like empno. So empno is something I made it as 10. Now this is not used anywhere in the program. So somewhere it has to be caught. So if let's what if I have mentioned 100 fields, 100 variables I have defined, but those 100 variables are we are not used in the program at all. That is waste of time. So it will be it should not be there in the program. It should be removed. So unnecessary code, unnecessary things in the program, or something which is not required, so all these things can be checked in the extended program check. In normal program check, it shows everything is perfect. Even if we activate, it says it's perfectly fine. But if you go for program check, extended program check, so we need to select the extended program check. So if you go for extended program check, then you can find out what are the issues that we have in the backend. So we'll go for the extended program check. All these are the part of the extended program check, and then we'll go for run checks. So it shows you that one field attribute is not required at all, and this is a part of warnings. It's not an error. It's not an error. It's just a warning saying that one field is there which is defined, which is not required at all. If you double click on it, it will directly show you that empno is not addressed statically in the program. So without it's statically in the program. So deactivatable using program needed. So once we comment it, this issue will not be there. So in this way, there will be a lot of checks which we'll do here. And if at all, if there is a message that is not maintained, or text is not maintained, so title bar is not, anything is there, that will be shown up here. So if I comment this, that will not be visible now. So I activate, and then that extended program check. So that is not visible now. Okay, so then we have something called performance analysis. Performance tuning also is important. So in the actually, the performance tuning and all will not be a part of code inspector, but when we are writing the code, we need to check all the things, like we need to also check the performance and all. That will come back to that element later. So let us complete this one. So we have seen the syntax check, and then we have seen the extended syntax check. So this is the extended program check which we have seen now. Okay, so that will actually show us what are the things that are not required and all these things. So syntax warnings we normally ignore, right? So we have to take them seriously. So this is just a warning, syntax warning. We normally ignore that. So instead of that, we have now we have fixed it, like here we have this. Here value. So when you have struct type, and struct type is actually value. This one, this much, and this is the value that we have. Now here it says the value specification is structured with numeric component makes for undefined initialization. So now what we have done here, struct type, struct underscore type, and the value initialization we have removed it. So when we removed the value initialization, it is syntactically correct. So the certain things that are just warnings, but we need to take it seriously. So here warning of the extended program check. So it's like after the current assign statement of size of RC remains unset. So what we can do here is, so you can say if fs is assigned. So assign field to fs. So instead of writing this if size of RC not equal to 0, you can say assign field to fs, and if fs is assigned, then we have this. So we have certain things that we can do in the we can automatically get the code here. There's something which I want to show you here. If we click on pattern, here we have select from which table. So I will go for MAST table, select from MAST table. If you say OK, then what are the fields that needs to be selected? So you can select what are the fields that needs to be selected, and choose this. So there will be select and select statement. So into L underscore MAST. So this is actually the work area. So this is the old coding actually. So what you used to do is this is a open native SQL statement. This is a native SQL statement. In native SQL statement, what happens for each and every native SQL? So each and every output, for each and every output, it will go to the standard table and get the data into the work area. This L underscore MAST happens to be the work area. We need to define it as a work area. So this is not suggestible. This we can generate it from the printer. Sorry, pattern object patterns we have used that. So if you have perform, okay, so perform statement, if you have used perform dxc. So if you use perform dxc, then the perform and perform statement will be perform, and form and form will be added here. So if you go for write pattern, case per status. So if I say case sy to name, so we can write it. So we can just lightly get it like this: sy case, sy ucom, and others. So in this we can write when something like when ext. Okay, so in this way also we can call the case statement as well. Structure data objects. So we can go for this with fields. So I'll go for st underscore emp. Okay, st underscore emp. System is a bit slow. Say okay. These are the fields. Actually, structure will be added here. Yeah, something like this. This should be the panel. So now what happens? I just type it as ts underscore. So begin of end of will automatically come. So what we can just write is we can write matnr, type matnr inside that. Okay, by default we can generate that. Okay, so select and select we can generate that, but that is a native SQL statement, so we cannot write it in the latest version. So this is something which we can ignore. And yeah, let's move on to the next. So ABAP test cockpit, we can make use of ABAP test cockpit. So in this, what we can do is we can find out the development oriented handling of the required tests. So ATC allows us to execution of the extended program check, static performance tests, and module test with ABAP unit browser, static usability tests, and package checks. So if the package is is not something like if the package is released or freezed or something like that, so that also we can check that. So here we have something like in the checks we have ABAP test cockpit etc. So that ABAP test cockpit takes care of all these syntax checks. So the system is responding a bit slow. Okay, so I'll just show that. So when we run that ABAP test cockpit, we'll have some errors, like any errors are there, we'll take care of them. Okay, so let's go ahead with the coding standards. So we'll be using the flower box is used. So we'll be using the flower boxes, and we'll see. I mean, like, normally wherever there is comments. Okay, so it's always good to have comments. We always need to maintain the comments, and we know that if you have to start the line with a comment, then you have to start with the star. And if it is in the between in middle of the line, we have to use the inverted quotes. So this is something which we need to write, and we need to always make sure that we write the code, write the text or the information wherever it is possible. So wherever it is possible, we have to make sure that we write we write the comments. So if let's say we have a program here, so in this program we have to make sure that we write this, here it's like start of declaration, startup declaration, so something like that. So in the program, on the top of the program also we should write the coding naming convention. So I've already mentioned that in the previous document I have shared it with you. Anyways, like we'll go ahead with these main top 60 coding standards that we have, the best practices. Program header updated with reference to FSD and TSD. See, whatever is the program header, we need to make sure we write the description. Descriptions cannot be something which as you like. So whatever is the functional specification document, technical specification document heading, so that heading should be updated in the header of the program. So here in the header of the program, in the sense here, let me go to a program. So here this is a header. Here this is a header. Okay, so here we can write something like this is a header of program. Header, this is a header of program. So here what we'll write is, we'll write title. We'll write title and we'll write no, program, a report program to display something. Okay, so whatever is the now program to display something which you're writing, or program to create screens or something like that. So whatever you are writing here, whatever title we are writing here, that we need to make sure that it is exactly the same as the FSD and TSD. This is what is the second point. Okay, so the third point is type verb is used while declaring the fields whenever feasible. So what you need to do is, you need to first declare everything in the types, and then later we need to assign the data. So instead of directly going for the data. Okay, so what do I mean by that is, so what do I mean by this? That is, if types is there, we are basically declaring everything in types, and then we are declaring the data. So this is how it is. So as I told you, in the old way of declaring the program, we used to have something like the internal table used to be directly declared with data. That is something which is not recommended here. So that is not something which you have to do it here. Okay, so we have to use, as much as possible, we have to use a types declaration instead of data. So we had internal table, right? So internal table declaration. Yes, this one. So we used to declare internal table directly in the data. That should be avoided here. That's what we are talking about in this naming convention, the coding standards. Then we have to have include programs is used. So wherever it is possible, we have to use include programs. If you see the standard programs, most of the declaration part will be in the include programs only. Even in the standard programs, even in the project implementation, in most of the projects, they will suggest us to go for this entire declaration part to be kept in the include programs. In fact, there will be some projects in which they want us to keep everything whichever is possible to keep it in the include programs. So, and then even the entire code has to be written in perform statements. We have to write the forms below, and then we have to write it. So most of the code, the entire code will be something like this. So let me copy this and explain you. Either it should be in include programs, or it should be in the forms. So in some, insist you to go ahead uh, with the include programs. In some, they will go for forms. Let us assume that we have to have a forms. So how do we declare the forms? Is like this entire field catalogs are there. Entire field catalogs, we are going to write it in one form statement. Perform fcats. Okay, means field catalogs. Double click on it, and it gets created below in forms, and at the bottom you will write the entire program in this particular subroutine. and then we'll go back, and this will be like the select statement will be again in another perform statement. So this is one perform, then we have another perform select, and double click on it, it gets created down, in which we have select statement, and back have this call function. So this entire call function will be in another select statement. Now here we write perform ALV. So we'll double click on this, say yes, the main program, say okay, and in this we'll go ahead with that. So this is what we have. Once it's been done, we'll just save and activate. So once it's active, you can execute. So it's like normal thing. So wherever it is possible, we'll be using either perform statements or we'll use the include statements. This is something which is not mandatory, but in some projects it will be made mandatory. So you have to make sure we according to the project we follow that. And then we have to use a pretty printer. Pretty printer just now we have discussed, right? So we just have to use a pretty printer. So when we use pretty printer, it will automatically change everything into according to the coding standards. So according to the coding standards, if in the project they say that all the standard code should be in capital letters, and this user defined fields or variables should be in lowercase letters, then if you click on this pretty printer, it will turn it off. But you have to activate this. First we need to activate it and click on pretty printer. So pretty printer is executed. So I think everything is in capital letters. So we'll go for utilities settings, and here in the pretty printer we'll change that option to uh, user keywords uppercase. Okay, keywords uppercase, and then we'll click on this pretty printer. Automatically everything else will become lowercase. Only the system defined fields should be in a will be automatically in capital letters. So this is what we have activate. So once it's been done, this is done, we can execute this. So this is the point which we have here. Pretty printer have to be used, and custom transaction codes have an authorization check implemented. See, by default SAP basis team will give you the authorization groups. There will be authorization groups which will be prepared for each department. For example, finance department will have a separate authorization group. A sales department will have a separate authorization group. Every department will have its own authorization group, but we technical people will have a separate authorization group for ABAP. So that authorization group, if it is assigned, then we'll be able to use all the transaction codes which we are using for programming. But the end users will have a separate authorization codes in which they will be given some fee, some transaction codes. Only those transaction codes they'll be able to open. Rest of things they'll not be able to open. So authorization checks can be maintained here. Authorization checks are maintained by the basis people, but when we are creating a transaction code, you need to make sure you are maintaining the authorization checks. So let's say we have ZDXC1234 and click on create. So here there will be an option called authorization check. Here there will be something called authorization check. So after giving the program name and screen number, so you have to give the authorization check. By default, there will be some authorization checks given by SAP, but we as a we in the project will be assigning some authorization checks which we need to create here. So once it's been done, we can assume that we have maintained the authorization checks. So whenever we are creating a transaction code, we need to make sure that we have the authorization checks there. So this is what we have. And next thing is we have a program assigned to a transaction code. So it's a good practice to maintain a transaction code for all the programs that we have created wherever it is possible. And comments are used properly. So there should be subheadings and comments. Comments should be very clear, guys, so that like anybody who doesn't know anything, they should be able to understand that. And we should remove the dead code. What do we mean by dead code is? Dead code is like, as I told you, we are declaring something and we are not using it. So if we are declaring something and we are not using it, that is called dead code. That dead code have to be removed. Menu text are in proper cases. So menu text, it should not be in a haphazard way. So they should be in a proper way. So menu text have to be maintained properly. All the texts, it's not just menu text, selection texts, and field text, everything have to be maintained properly. Then we have select field names is instead of, okay, we always have to use select field names instead of select star, because we all know that select star should not be used because it will select all the fields and it will affect the performance. And work area should be always cleared. See, remember when we have used a program for internal table, so we said once we appended the data into the internal table, we cleared the work area, because it's always good practice to clear the work area. I also showed you the disadvantages of not clearing the work area. What happens here is, if you have not appended, if you modify, if you're not modified the, if I've just used the modify command at the time, and when I am not appending some value, I'm not entering the value into the work area, by default the old value was getting updated. So there will be some issues when you don't clear the work area. Whenever the work of the work area is done, it's always good practice to clear the work area. This is a very important thing you have to remember. Select into table is used to populate the internal table. So we should not use select and select. In select and select, what happens, we will enter the data into work area. So for each and every record in the select and end select, if for each and every record, it will go to the database table, guys, database tab. So it will be a huge load on the database server. Of course, in the HANA database, it will not be a problem because the database is extremely powerful. But in general, this is something which we always follow in the ABAP. So loop, in the loop, where used instead of using loop and then check. So in loop statements, I'll just show you this. In the loop statements, instead of a where statement, instead of conditions again inside the loop, we can write loop. In loop itself, we can write from and to. Okay, so this one I'll show you. So I'll show you this. So internal table is sorted before using the binary search. If at all, if you have to use the binary search, you have to make sure the internal table is sorted. So you know how to sort it. Sort it underscore emp by empno, something like that. So we'll be doing that, and we can sort it based on ascending and descending. We have discussed that, right? Okay. So append lines to in itab into itab 1 into itab instead of using append itab 1 to itab 2. So what exactly happens here is, like, instead of direct, see, we can append directly from internal table to internal table, guys. Instead of appending from internal table to internal table, each field have to be assigned. Just like in the screen values, you have assigned to assign each and every value to work area and then append the internal table, right? So our database table, you have done it directly for database table. So instead of going for internal table to internal table, you have to go from value to value, field to field. So report columns are aligned correctly. So those needs to be aligned correctly. Report columns. So report columns means this one. So everything is properly assigned. So these are properly aligned, and everything is properly aligned in the code. I'm talking about the code. Okay, and then we have appropriate messages is used to display messages. See, guys, like if at all, if we are using select statement in the real time, if you are using select statement, it is damn sure that you have to select the size of RC. Okay, if size of rc is equals to 0, then you should not have any error. Otherwise, it's a coding standard. It's a normal general practice that wherever you're writing select statement, you have to check if it is successful or not successful. If select statement is not successful, definitely you have to populate the message. It's mandatory. Just like it's mandatory for us to give the select options, right? See, there was no program in which I have not written select options. Everywhere I have written select options, guys. So you can use select options. Instead of that, you can also use parameters as well. But I've used it's a practice that we have to use at least single select option, even if the client is not specifying it. Normally we do it. So here in the after the select statement, we have to write the size of rc. If size of rc is equal to 0, select statement is successful. If size of rc is not equal to 0, then it is not successful. So something like this. Okay, so these kind of messages we always have to give. This is the very important. So we need to check the status of the code, and then we need to write this message. This is very important. Okay, and appropriate messages is used to be have to be displayed wherever it is required. Text symbols are used instead of hard codes. So text symbols are very very important, guys. Like instead of writing something, if you want to write something before this, let's say we want to write before this select statement, we want to write this is material storage data, something like that. If you want to type this, instead of typing like this, what you need to do is you are not supposed to write it like this. You're supposed to write it like write text text hyphen 001, and then you have to double click on this, and inside this you have to write that. Inside this text you have to write this. Okay, this is material storage. Okay, this is the right way of doing it. Material storage. So you should not write it directly. And there are advantages for this, many advantages for it. So we can fix the maximum value, maximum length, how much length we have, because we have seen the advantage of going for text one when we are using the headings in the normal classical report, right? So there we fixed up the exact length of the heading, how much we want, we have fixed it up. Okay, so there are many advantages. You can use this write text 001 any number of times in any number of places within the program. So this is something we always have to make sure. Text is not written directly. We have to make use of this text elements, text symbols. SLIN check is completed. So this syntax check, I'll show you this syntax check. What is this SLIN check? I'll show you. Syntax check we already know. So Control F2, and program check through code inspector. So just like we have extended program check and all these things, so we have to also go for code inspector. Unused tables from table statement should be removed. Unused variables should be removed. Unused text elements should be removed. Code statements which do not do nothing are removed. Okay, code statements, if there is a line which is of no use, then you have to remove this. Commented our parts of codes. Unit test is completed. Unit test have to be completed. Program test text with reference to fsd is completed. Following naming conventions. So what is fsd? Functional specification document, right? It's a document. With seeing that document only, you will understand what exactly you have to do. Is it a report? Is it a smart form? Is it a code or something like that? This is what we have. Naming conventions. So followed the naming conventions. Naming conventions is very important, guys. It's like, as of now it's okay, whatever I'm writing wa, you are writing w, or I'm writing I and it underscore k in one, and you're writing is just like I just I underscore something like that. Anything is okay today when we're practicing, but naming conventions for everything is extremely important in the program. If you're not following the naming conventions also, it might not be passed through the testing phase. Okay, it will fail the testing phase. uh, Headers should be used for include programs. Headers are mandatory for include programs. We have to write it very clearly what should be the um, heading. And selection screen fields should be validated at selection screen. So whatever selection screen fields we are giving, we have to validate it at selection screen whether the data is there or not. We have used select single statement to validate it. Case statement should be used in place of if, where a single field is checked for more than two values. If let's say case statement should be used, if let's say there is a field, guys, on a single field, if you are checking all the options, then you go for case. If you have the check on multiple fields, then you have to go for if. Okay, so only required columns used instead of using select star. Only required columns are used instead of select star. So required, we have already always used that. We have always used only couple of fields instead of select star. An internal table should be sorted before you doing a binary search. We already discussed that. When appending itab to itab2, we should always use instead of itab to itab, we have to use field to field. Okay, appropriate messages should be used for displaying errors. The events that appear in the program should be in the order in which they are generally executed. Means you have what is the order: initialization, at selection screen, startup selection, end of selection, top of page, end of page. They should be in same order, guys. Like let me tell you, even if you write it in a different order, it will work fine. Even if we write initialization at the end, top of page at the top, or select startup selection at somewhere in the middle, anywhere you write the event, it will be executed according to the procedure that we have. So wherever you write, initialization will be executed first, something like that. Okay, so all the texts and or messages created in the text id only instead of hard coding. So we should always make sure that we are writing in the text ids instead of hard coding the value text. All components being saved under the same transport request name. This is very very important, guys. See, what are all the components? What do we mean by components? See, if you create a database table, the domains and data elements happen to be the components. Okay, it's not that you have one program, you are doing two programs, one for material master, another for sales. Those two, even though you are doing it, they are not considered as same components. They are different individual objects. But components means what? Domains and data elements are the components of database table. You understand that, right? So all these things should be kept purposefully. They have to be kept in one transport request only. What happens if you keep them in the different transport request is, if one is transported, another is not transported. For example, domains are not transported, database table is transported, then domain definition is not there in the quality server, then it will fail in the quality server. They will work fine in database server, development server, but in the quality server it will fail. So you have to make sure all the components are on the same request number. It's very very important, guys. Never use exit commands in user exits, that I'll tell you. So user field symbol instead of work area. So instead of work area, we can use field symbols, because field symbols will entertain the length of the field according to the size of that work area. So I will explain you this later by example. So never use commit or rollback in bad implementations. This also I'll explain you. Using naming conventions, using naming standards for every SAP objects. Naming conventions have to be followed. And SLIN syntax, I'll just tell you that. Use pretty printer, we already saw. So make flowchart diagram. So if you before doing the program, it's always good to do the flowchart diagram and get the approval of your of the reporting person to whom you are reporting. So if you get the flowchart, you will get a very good clarity of what to do first, what to do next, and all these things. Flowchart is very extremely important, guys. It's very good to follow the flowchart. So in the flowchart, what happens? Okay, I have done this. Next step, what you have to do. Next step, what you have to do. It will be easy for us. Okay. Never use hard coding. Use always standard messages, class or text elements. Don't mail any confidential things to your personal email IDs. That's something which is very crucial, because they'll track it. Always check your code before sending it to the reviewer. So make sure you double check before sending it to the reviewer, because reviewer will check it and find the mistakes and highlight them and keep everyone in CC and then send it to you. So programming start with Z, or so program should start with Z, guys. See, Y, as I told you, it can be used for with Y or Z. So some people, what they did was, like, just because Y also can be acceptable, for a change they will use Y. No, you should not use Y, because according to the coding standards, what the implementation project have plan is, in most of the projects, they'll plan all the testing fields or testing programs. They'll start with Y. Okay, so that's the reason you, if they want you to start with Z, you have to always start with Z only, not with Y. So variable starting with G underscore for global variables. I will explain you that. Subroutine starting with ZF underscore. If at all, if you are using, I mean, like in a particular project, whatever is the subroutine syntax that you have to follow. Select options, whether make sure it is S underscore or SO underscore, whatever it might be. Transaction codes, variants, these all things have to be followed according to the naming conventions. There's a big list for naming conventions which we have discussed, right? So all those things have to be satisfied. This. So use header and comment lines. It's mandatory. Use all includes, and use flower box in the top of program. So there are some coding standards which might be repeated twice. So just ignore them, guys. So these are the major coding standards which we have to follow when we are doing the when we are writing the programs. Okay, and so there was a coding in the coding standards, whatever is there. So each program will have, each project will have its own coding standard. So you have to observe carefully what should be the coding standards, what should be the naming conventions we have to follow. Okay, let's say if you are creating an ad hoc, it should start with Z text for representative. So I have seen when I'm doing the code review in the standard, I mean, like in the projects, I've seen a lot of guys, right? They do a mistake here. After Z, they will keep underscore. In most of the projects, I have seen this. So at least there will be one or two guys who will actually keep after Z underscore. See, underscore is not there here in the coding standards. Do you see any underscore here? No. Here you see underscore. Okay, here you see underscore. So when underscore is not expected here, you should not write it. What is that? You have to start Z and application area. What is the application area? It will be there in the top. Okay, it will be here. The application area is in the top. Let me show you that. So that becomes an error, guys. Like, it's not an error. Actually, it becomes something which cannot be approved. Again, they might send back. See, what is the application area? Is mm. So if, let's say, you are writing a program for mm. Okay, we are writing it to m for mm. So what people write, instead of writing, what is expected out of you? It is expected that you will write the naming convention of the program, something like this: Z Z mm underscore, write something. Okay, whatever you want to write, you write it. That's different thing. But what most of the people do, Z underscore underscore. This becomes again this becomes a unacceptable thing. They'll send it back. Okay, so those kind of things are very silly, but it happens in projects. Okay, and as I told you, why also, why is actually syntactically it's correct, guys, but throughout the naming conventions, when they are saying use Z, and when you are using Y, it will not be approved. Okay, so this naming. So instead of going through the entire 25 pages, I'll have it as, normally in most of program projects we'll be having it 20 to 40 pages of naming conventions will be there, guys. Like, if you have a patience to go through that, you can go through that. Otherwise, what you can do is you can simply go through the programs which are already done in the past. Okay, just check out the programs which are there in the past, and then see, you can see all the naming conventions in one place. What is, how the select options are being declared, select statement, and internal table, work area, structures, variables, constants. What are the naming conventions? You can get all the naming conventions in one program, if at all you can find out but make sure it is already approved by your approver. If you are copying the naming conventions from something which is not approved, again, your program also will not be approved. So these all things have to be carefully, guys. And one more, see, this is how the header looks like. Okay, this is how the header should look like. Okay, in the top of the program, you have to write something like this. So this also is a naming convention. This will be done by, given by the given in the naming conventions list or document. There'll be a document they'll give it to you. So in this, on the top of the program, you have to copy this will be in entire comments. Okay, everything will be in comments. Everything will be in comments. Okay, let me show you for the same thing. So in this, we can go ahead with on the top. So we can remove this. Okay, this is all not matter. So we'll just copy this, and here you should give the naming. I mean, like name of the author. Okay, you'll be giving your name, developer user ID. So if you in some projects they want your name, in some projects they need your username. So, and then we have to go for the date, transaction code if attached. You have to mention the transaction code, which transaction code we have to run for using it, technical design, and description. This description was what I was telling you guys. This description should be exactly the same as the title of the functional specification document. Okay, so that should be, and request number also will be mentioning here. So what is the transport number? Here it will be like modification information. So if at all, if somebody is modifying, then you have to write it down. Okay, here we have to give the transport request also. Transport request, here transport request number, which you have initiated first. So all this information, in some companies they'll have 10 to 20 lines of information on the top. So it depends on the project to project and client to client. You have to follow all these instructions very carefully, perfectly. Okay, so these are the coding standards that we have to follow, guys. And never ever write this no nested loops. Loop at, if you're writing an end loop, inside loop you again should not use a loop. This is a these are the common coding standards that we have to follow. Inside a loop you should not write a loop. Inside a loop you should not write if statement. Inside an if statement again you should not write in end if is there. And then again inside this again you should not write if and if, because this becomes a nested loop. So in a nested loops will rotate multiple number of times. If let's say we have 100 records, 100 into 100, 10,000 times it will be rotating. So that should not happen. So to avoid that, nested loops should be avoided always. Okay, and select star should be avoided. Select star should be avoided, and select and select should be avoided. Select and select, we never use that actually in our program, because it has become completely obsolete in the normal programming. So select and select we should avoid, and we should always make sure that we have the select options. Select options, or at least one select option, or at least one parameter have to be there. So we have to make sure we always have a structure declared, and after the structure is declared we have to go for itab, internal table declaration. So these all things are the very standard normal things that we have to follow for every program, guys. So these are certain things that you have to remember, and if there are few more things, I'll be explaining you in the coming sessions. Whenever the project, inside the project, whenever we come across it, I'll highlight that. Okay, and never forget to, after select statement, never forget to write the size of RC. You have to check the size of RC value. That is also very important, guys.